It's familiar faces.
It's good to see people in person.
What's that?
It's great to see people in person. I never thought I'd enjoy coming to this room, but it's so much better than being online. I have to say.
There's still people I have business relationships with. I've never actually been in the same room with. And that, something wrong with that.
Yeah. Right. Make sure your mics are on.
Okay, everybody, good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Thursday, March 16th, 2023, 4 p.m. Board of Health meeting. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded by video and audio. And those of you who are joining us through Zoom, please use the raise hand button, and myself or actually Roberta will get to you. And we do have one board member joining us by Zoom, which is Meredith Lepre. Okay. Public comment. Is there anything that's not on this agenda that anybody would like to talk about? Okay, seeing nothing. We're gonna jump to well regulations because Michael Maynard, who's doing our presentation for us, has some time constraints. So we'll go right to Michael's presentation.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Michael Maynard. I work for the Health Department for Roberta. And first off, I'd like to, this is probably my first fairly big public presentation since COVID. So and I used to talk a fair amount and you do a lot of presenting. So it's actually nice to be here. Thanks for the work that you do for the town of Nantucket. And I know a lot of times the Board of Health gets a bum rap, but I really appreciate the work that you do for the town and for public health. So with that said, this is a project, so it's modification to the private well regs, chapter 386. Roberto, myself, and John met to discuss some of these things, and we've got a couple sides. So what we were trying to do is we came up with a strategy. So we're looking for consistency in protecting water quality. And that is the public water systems, which there are approximately 4 on the island. The largest one being the water company, and approximately 4,500 private wells that are regulated by the town. All public water systems, that's Mass General Law 310 CMR 2210. If you're suffering from insomnia, I think that's a pretty good read if you'd like to. Private wells are regulated, as you know, by the local Board of Health pursuant to chapter 111, 31.386. In the regs that we're working off of, 386 were originally approved August 24th, 90, and then you made some revisions to them June 16th, 23. And I apologize if I'm just, zipping through these things, but so let's see, Mass. So what we tried to do is there are existing guidelines out there from Mass DEP and a model Board of Health regulations that are out there. I know the original regs that you have, 386, were adopted from pieces of that model Board of Health regulation. So Roberto and John thought it was a good place to actually, they just reissued the model Board of Health regulations just, 2-3 weeks ago on the DEP website. And we use that as the basis for any of the changes that we're thinking about. Also, in order to promote private wells on the island and with our staff and with the staff on Martha's Vineyard in the cooperative agreement, we have a private well training course that's coming up, and that's the link. And Roberto will send that out, or I can send it out, and people can participate as for staff that are going to be doing these evaluation of private well. And the instructor is excellent, by the way. So next slide, please, Roberto. So particularly, as you know, PFAS it's been in the news. I have a slide about that with the EPA changing some of the regulations on PFAS. But you've also taken what we tried to do, I think, and Roberto, jump in here, is you already have a policy in place. You have a number of policies in place that you took to address PFAS. And that was particularly sampling and some of the other things. So we kind of took the policy that you approved and we rolled portions of it into the reg rewrite. So we weren't coming up with anything new. In some instances, we made some additions, but we took the policy that you had already on the books and kind of wove it into the regulations. As you know, it's better to have it in the regulation. There is always some ambiguity in policies, but if it's in the reg, it's easier to enforce. So this is just some of the definitions of PFAS. I'm sure you've already seen man-made chemicals, stain resistance, so forth and so on. Next slide. So just earlier this week, EPA proposed stringent new mandatory PFAS standards with the MCLs. So this is going to have a significant impact on public water systems like the water company. I think I'm pretty sure they are below the standards that are coming out, which is great. They do a great job over at the water company. But I know some of the other communities within Massachusetts are going to be struggling with these new regulations that are coming out. They're lowering the standard. So those are just some of the bullet points. There's a number of presentations, online discussions with EPA over the next 60 days that you'll see everywhere. So if you just Google PFAS presentations by EPA, you will just be absolutely amazed about how many presentations are out there. Roberto, do you have anything to add or?
I think you're going over the points pretty well. So.
Okay. I know I'm buzzing through them here, but okay. So just 60 days comment period opened the other day for EPA. I think they're going to get a pushback. EPA is going to get a pushback from municipalities that can't make the standard and have to install some significant treatment systems. But there is money available for treatment. As you know, the town has applied for and received some of the PFAS treatment money over the last couple of years. So over the next 5 years, there's a significant amount of money available for PFAS. And I think the town is in good position to continue to submit the SRF applications and receive money for treatment. Next slide. Thank you. So these were some of the things that we had talked about. I think Roberto had mentioned it previously. So these are modifications to 386. Again, we used the Mass DEP private well guidelines and the model Board of Health regulations that are out there. We weren't trying to create anything new. We were just rolling in. We were using these documents as well as the policies that you've already created. That word private shouldn't be there, but I forgot to eliminate it.
No worries.
And this is the biggest modification, I think, is the modification to Section 8, water quality testing. And it will just be requiring testing for the private wells for these 6 PFAS chemicals. These are the chemicals that the testing has gone on over the island. The UMass came on board. UMass came out. The Board of Health and the town worked with UMass Amherst School of Engineering to do the private well sampling. I think probably a year and a half ago. They chose 40 private wells and they pulled the samples on those. I think there were 5 exceedances on that. Roberto, am I correct on that? 5 out of 40.
Yeah.
And those are private wells. So basically, the water company already samples for these, and they do it quarterly. And if there's an exceedance, then they have to report it to DEP. So what we're doing is we're just taking the policy that you already have in place, and we're requiring water quality testing for the same PFAS chemicals. It's not a wide ranging, it's not like a mandatory, you must, if you have a private well, you must sample for PFAS. Roberto and John and myself and DEP actually recommends, they'd like to have that, but they realize that it would be cost prohibitive. So they're trying to phase it in, the requirements for the water quality testing. So that would be on the sale of possibly on the sale of a property, that they have to, right now they have to take some samples. They would roll in this sample to make sure that if PFAS is in the well, that it's found on the sale of property, very similar to Title V. It would be any modification. Oh, go ahead, Roberta. Oh, okay. It would be any modifications to the existing well. So if they had to replace the screen or make a modification to the well, they're going to have to do a round of sampling, and it would include PFAS. So again, we're not trying to create anything new. We're just trying to protect the water quality for the people that are on the water company, town water, and the private wells. I know that sampling costs hopefully are coming down. I know when this started 3 years ago, it was pretty significant, but it's come down, pretty considerably. And I think there are a number of other initiatives where the costs of the sampling are going to be driven down as the qualified labs actually start to increase, because it was difficult when they were ramping up for it. But what we're seeing is more Mass state certified labs actually trying to get certified for PFAS, to evaluate PFAS in drinking water.
So,
And I think that's my last slide. So
Yeah.
we made a couple of changes. Roberto's gonna distribute.
yeah, I have the regulation if we can go through, if you want to go through it, but we can also, I emailed it out and it'll be in the packet. So more than anything, what we're asking for today would be for the setting of a public hearing, whether that be next month or the month after. And in the meantime, this will be available. And I know Meredith has a question. I can see it. Once we answer the questions here, the engineers can review it. We didn't change a lot, but we know that it's a lot to read over, and we don't expect you to take any action on it today. We just want to get it out, put it into the packet, get this presentation out to give you a quick overview. Let me actually turn off the sharing here. A quick overview so that we can at least start the process of discussing and digesting. We did add, I know Carrie had some suggestions from the regulation. Those were implemented as well. And I know that there was the conversations about the 300-foot down gradient questions from December. Those are also looked at. But I know that there were questions from the engineers that I know they want to look at it. I know Don is on the call today. I'd love to get Don's input before our next meeting, and we just go forward from there. Meredith.
I'm just wondering, it says that if the town water tested positive for PFAS, that they tell EPA, but do the people in the town find out? Is there a way, having dealt with this
Yes.
already once, does the water company tell the people who have town water?
Yes. So all the water tests right now are published on the Wanacamic Water Company's website. They can see they've published everything. Only one well so far has had a hit for PFAS in it, and it is below the state's 20 part per trillion threshold, but I don't know the exact number, so I don't know if it is below the 4 parts per trillion threshold that EPA is looking at. I'll have to confirm with Mark. But if it does get above the threshold, they are mandated to report to everyone who has who has received water from that particular well to let everyone know directly.
How do they do that? Is that, I mean, putting it on the website is great, but like, I don't really look at the Wannacomet Water Company website very often.
I know they do, they're required by law to submit they call it a consumer confidence report. So annually, they have to give a summary of everything that's happened on the public water system. And that should be coming, I think it should be sent out soon, because I think it is for the calendar year. So part of they call it the CCC, Consumer Confidence Report. So all of their sampling is published, has to be published and distributed to the user community on an annual basis.
And so every year you'll get it in the mail, the consumer confidence. But if there is an exceedance, Mark does have a process to let you know as well directly.
I had one other, so that you said that there are 6 types, but are there more with this new change? Will there be more types tested?
The testing, we can test for all 24. Most laboratories, for example, GNL, Eurofins, and Alpha Analytical and Eurofins, they test for the 24 of concern right now. These 6 are the ones that are part of the mandate to be repaired, to be remedied. However, we do know that eventually EPA will be setting up regulatory standards for the other 16 or 18.
Great, thank you.
And Roberta, quick question. Because what started the whole discussion was the whole thing about new construction versus improvements on that 1979, kind of exception. Is that addressed through the 400, 300-foot thing in here, or is that a separate item that is addressed in the future?
It will be addressed in this particular regulation. So when let me share the screen again to confirm for the people at home and Meredith as well. Share screen. So in everything you'll see in yellow, everything that's been highlighted, and we did email this out to you as well. Everything that is highlighted is all the changes that we've made, the major changes. Michael, is all of them are all the changes highlighted?
Yeah, the ones that we thought were significant were highlighted in yellow. Like we don't have that extensive of a table of contents in existing 386, but the ones in yellow are the ones that you should read everything and point out anything. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. But what you're looking at now is the model Board of Health regulations from Mass DEP. Yeah. So because it was so comprehensive, we took that and then we took the existing 386 and tried to merge it in, which would, so if there was a comparison, if something was in the model Board of Health in 386, I didn't color it in yellow because it's something you're familiar with, like that one.
So here we go.
Yeah, and all the strikeouts or stuff is being removed.
Exactly.
All the strikeout, yes.
Yeah. So here in the well construction permit, we did merge it with what we have now. So the 300 feet and the 200 feet requirement, actually in here, we actually have it as, it was 400 feet.
Yeah, the 200 went to 400 and there was a 300 further down.
So we have added all of that in. We do think that what was described at the last meeting as a loophole, we do think that has been closed with this. But again, that's why we have the public review, because we want you to look at it and poke holes in it. And then the public hearing at the next meeting or two.
And also I have a meeting tomorrow. There's a group of 6 students from WPI, the School of Engineering, that are going to take our existing regs and the model Board of Health and just tear into them. So they're going to compare it to existing PFAS and model Board of Health regulations that are out there. They've been working with DEP to do this, and they'll have a presentation, but they do a pretty thorough job. They choose a project, and since PFAS and regulations and Roberto volunteered to participate in it. They'll be going into it over the next couple of months. Hopefully, we'll have a presentation for them about how our regulations are in comparison to, and we've already done a comparison. There aren't many, I think there's the town of Harvard, Mass has one small, they put in a sentence about PFAS. Stowe, Mass and Central which is having significant PFAS issues, are in the process of changing their regulations. I think there's another one, Bolton, maybe, but there's only 2 or 3. I mean, everyone's thinking about it, but no one is as far, from my experience and discussions with Roberto, as far as Nantucket. I mean, talking, the wastewater sampling, the landfill leachate sampling, the things that are going on in the airport. I think we're well positioned to be, a national model, whether we want to or not. We are.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions for Michael?
I just have
When
one.
would the public meeting be? How long is it going to take to get this till we have a public meeting?
So we can schedule the public hearing for next meeting.
Well, I
And
mean,
then-
this is going to affect a lot of people.
Yeah.
So how are we going to get it out to everybody on Nantucket today? They really need to be here to understand what's going on. I mean, if you say we're having a public meeting for the water, how many people are going to actually show up here?
To be fair, the last time we did when we did regulation 78, we only had 3 people show up because
It's going to affect an awful lot of people on that.
even though we put it out in the newspaper and social media on all over the place in NCTV, usually people don't care that it affects them until it actually starts affecting them.
But there will now, if people have their own well, it's really going to affect them financially and you know what I mean? So I think we need to find a way to get it so the public understands how serious this thing is.
I'll work with our public information officer to get it out as much as we can. And I know Don's got a question. So and I think Malcolm.
I was just, maybe this is more relevant, this question, but going back to 78,
Mhm.
there was requirement of mandatory testing every year, every 2 years.
There was, but at the time, it's actually the discussion we had yesterday for the pools. At the time, my eyes were bigger than my stomach. We didn't have enough people to actually enforce it the way we wanted to. We have much more technology now through EnerGov. We've been able to streamline a lot of processes, and we have literally 3 times the amount of staff in comparison to where we were when Regulation 78 came through. So this will actually supplant that, but we do expect to be able to do this because this is actually in a different enforcement manner, kind of similar to the septic systems, to the IA system. So it's a little bit
But
easier.
we still have mandatory testing of wells on 78, or
It is still on the books.
so we haven't enforced it.
It just hasn't been enforced.
And do you plan to enforce it?
We do. And well, this
With
will,
all these
this
all
new
these
regulation-
resources that I asked about you
Yeah.
yesterday.
this new regulation will supplant that. So it won't be mandatory testing every 2 years anymore. It'll be mandatory testing at these trigger points, which was like property transfer, any construction work, things like that. So it does just like the septic system, and that's much more doable.
Yeah, this will affect the real estate market.
Possibly, yeah.
Well,
Yes,
it will.
because of the
Every-
property
every
transfer.
sale will-
Yes.
that will be included
Mhm,
in like, any other thing that you have to have.
mhm.
Septic system inspection, this would be,
Water sampling, though, it's something that's already done. We're just asking them to do the PFAS sample as well. That's the only difference.
Yeah, and that's at the point of, it's like sale and stuff, the yearly
Yes.
testing that private well owners is still that short list of the arsenic and,
Correct.
and that didn't, when I looked at it, that one didn't change. That's not changing that's not checking for PFAS. It's going to
Correct.
be at sales, construction, and kind of big events.
Correct.
Which it should be. So,
And Don, you're good to go.
Yeah, oh, thank you very much. I know it's going to be a public hearing, but I think before that, I just had a couple of comments I'd like to make. The first one is the notification of abutters. If we're changing the well regulations, Nantucket is the only town I know of that requires notification of abutters for a well permit. And to this day, I've always kind of scratched my head as to why that is required and why the board would feel that's important to keep it in there. I'm not sure what the connection is, but obviously, we do a lot of well permit applications, and it's a fairly significant cost and amount of work to notify, especially in areas with a lot of property. So I just want to throw that out there because I have the opportunity, I guess, to complain about it a little bit. But either way, it doesn't matter to us, but I'm just kind of curious what the rationale was from the beginning and what the rationale would be going forward. The other comment I'd like to make is when you rewrite the regulations, if there's any way you can take a second look at the groundwater flow direction plans, and there's a couple of older ones, and the regulations, somewhat connected exactly to it, but there are some gray areas. And on those plans, there are some dome areas where there is no groundwater flow direction. So I didn't go through all the regulations, so I'm assuming that you're still going to have the same protective zones based on groundwater flow that you already had, that those will stay in place. But maybe while you're looking at it, maybe this could be a little more clarification, or at least an update on the plans that we've been using, which are like 33 years old now. So anyway, those are my two comments. I look forward to, seeing the changes and participating in the discussion, at the next meeting.
So Don, actually, we have good news for you.
All right.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the abutters notification is not in this regulation.
Okay, good.
But we'll take a look at it to make sure.
Yeah.
It was part of the original regulation back in 1990, but but those were for completely different reasons. The rationale back then, we don't have the technology we have today, is basically what it boils down to. And then the second one, when it comes to the groundwater contour maps and the groundwater flow direction, instead of specifically calling out the Horsley-Witten maps on there, we refer to the most recent adopted groundwater map from the town. So we're in the process right now to the Great Harbor Yacht Club is funding a groundwater mapping study for the Great Harbor the Great Harbor watershed. So that would be, and then we're going to be creating a GIS layer for that with the mapping. Unfortunately, that's going to take at least a year. So we're still going to have to use the Horsley-Witten in the meantime. But once the maps start getting updated, this regulation is worded so that it automatically evolves with the new maps. So good news on that front.
Great, that's good.
So Roberto, that would mean there will be a GIS layer.
Yes.
That identifies the groundwater flow.
Correct.
And also in that note, Mass DEP is currently mapping all of the private wells on the island, and they have a well mapping program. So I know John has been working with Mass DEP in the well mapping and the drinking water program to at least have a layer, a theme or a layer, a GIS layer, where you can actually see where there is a drinking water well, where there's an irrigation well. And I'll find out and update Roberto on that, but they're pretty far along in that. They're doing the entire state, and Nantucket is currently being done. So that's a good thing. For free. Well,
yeah.
Good. Any other questions?
I know this is a public hearing. I just have a question. Is that are the proposed regulations that I'm going to miss this part, going to require testing upon a sale, like septics?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
So usually the water sample is already part of the sale. We're going to be requiring that PFAS test. That's
Yeah,
the
so
difference.
I guess when I heard you say that, I mean, a water sampling is relatively common when there's a well, but not required and not always done. So that will change significantly. And I think to Mr. Cooper's point, in terms of communication, I really think you guys should, if you can, when these public hearings are happening, just throw out an email to all the attorneys and brokers if you can.
Absolutely.
I don't imagine they would have any issue with that regulation, but just to keep them informed so that when it does happen, it actually
Yeah.
gets done by the community.
Up until COVID, I used to do the groundwater CEUs, the continuing education course for NARAB over at the hotel. I imagine this would be one of those continuing education courses. More than happy to do it. But yes, we'll definitely get it out to as many people as we can.
And I know there has been some discussion that if people are transferring property and the water supply is contaminated with PFAS, that opens up a whole another can of worms after the sale. So this is more of a preemptive strike to, to clear the deck, know what you're going into as opposed to after the fact.
Right. Any other-
In light of some of the comments, I wouldn't mind doing this public hearing, pushing it to the May meeting. That way we can have a good 60 days
Yeah.
to start doing all the outreach and make sure people are out there
Yeah.
and they can get comments into us beforehand.
Right.
Yeah, I like the May date. Yeah.
All right. But we would need a vote, so.
I move that we hold a public hearing on the new regulations in May.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
And Kathy,
Hey,
for
thanks
the,
thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks.
and Kathy, for the record, for the minutes, that would be the May 18th meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want to wait on your director's report till the end or?
Yeah, let's just push all that to the end.
Okay, so we'll just jump to the change of escrow agent for Finback Homeowners Association.
Yep. So this is the overall, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. I know Rick is here for the homeowners association. This is basically the who we contact for when it comes to septic systems and water and things like that. We have no objection to the request, but Rick, if you would like to give any updates.
Wish I could bill my client to say it more eloquently than that.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, the existing escrow agent was set up by the developer and hasn't been particularly responsive to the association. So they just want to make sure they have control and an eye on all the money that's held in the event the shared septic system has to be replaced or repaired. And so they just start changing the escrow agent to make sure they know who that person is and that person will take care of it. That's all.
They don't need it. Do they need it? Okay, to do it?
Yes.
We do need to approve that change.
Okay.
But other than that, but we have no problem with it.
Right. Okay. All right. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks so much.
Aye.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
Okay, next, 8 Austin Farm Drive, nitrogen loading credit.
Yes, so this one is very similar to what we've seen before. It's in the Nantucket Harbor Hummock Pond watershed. So they're putting in a system for the bedroom credit. It's going to be less nitrogen than if they put in what they're allowed to conventionally. We've approved many of these before, but Don here, if you would like to take over and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, there's a increase in the number of bedrooms, obviously for a proposed structure. Right now, it doesn't have an IA system, has a leaching field. It's mounted in the front yard. We're basically going to replace the existing leaching field. Actually, the leaching trenches. We're basically going to replace the trenches with a leaching field for the added bedroom and add the IA system to it, or the septic tech system. And as Roberta said, it's, we're asking, it's a 4-bedroom house right now. And so, we're going up to a 6-bedroom house, but with the IA system, it's equivalent to about 3 bedrooms as far as nitrogen loading goes. So, as he said, it is an actual reduction, even though we're adding the bedroom. And that's it.
Okay, a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, 26 Rabbit Run Road. septic tank, pump chamber, and soil absorption system setbacks.
A similar situation, well, not even a similar situation. This is just a situation where they need setbacks to be able to be in compliance. We've had no objection to this one for maximum feasible compliance. Don, if you want to fill in any of the gaps.
Yeah, sure. This one is, yeah, a little different than usual. So the applicants are proposing to put some additions on the existing structure. It's an existing 6-bedroom septic system, pre-1995, with a septic tank, pump chamber, and 1 leaching pit. It's a very large lot. The house is located down by the water, and the septic system itself is located toward Shawkemo Road, several hundred feet away. So it's pumped a pretty significant distance. You know, we're in the Nantucket Harbor watershed area. So the plan here is to take out the existing septic tank that's there and put in a microfast IA system to meet the harbor watershed requirements. We're going to utilize the same pump chamber that's there. And we're going to replace the existing leaching pit, you know, with the current design standard for soil absorption system. I don't know if you have the plans in front of you, but if you look at it, obviously the soil absorption system under today's standards takes up much more space than the leaching pit did. So we're asking for 2 local upgrade approvals. You know, the first one on the septic tank for the setback from the new tank, which is in the same location as the old one, to the coastal bank resource area. Now, and we're also asking for the same waiver for the soil absorption system to the coastal bank setback. But what's important to note is that the coastal bank delineation in this case, it actually comes from a DEP regulation, you know, that's been interpreted in the 90s. It's based on the slope of the land in connection with the flood zone. So where we're asking the relief from is actually from wooded areas of the lot. So it's more, in my opinion, it's more of a technical variance than, I shouldn't even say variance because it's an upgrade approval, you know, than what you would normally expect. In fact, you know, there are also wetlands on the site. And if you look at the plan, you can see the septic tank is over 50 feet from the actual wetlands where there is some interface with groundwater. And that's really, I think, what the focus of the regulation would be, is protecting an area like that. Same situation where the soil absorption system is, you know, again, the coastal, we're asking for variance down the coastal bank to 78 feet, but the actual distance to the wetland itself is 114 feet. So, you know, we definitely feel this is a very big improvement over what's existing, and that the variances were asked for, as I said, is more of a technicality than anything else. And that's it. Thank you.
It's, yeah, I carry here. It's a big lot. So even is the placement, the optimal placement for the septic system, or could it be someplace else on the lot still without requiring variances? You know, again, I'm not an expert on reading topographical maps, so I'm counting on everyone else's experience to answer that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and we certainly looked at that. And there's a reason why the leaching pit was put there to begin with, because it is the best location on the lot as far as elevation and the setbacks to the wetlands. If we could have put it in another location, we probably would have, but this really was the optimum location on the property.
Yeah, as far as the leach field is concerned, it is the best location we can find. The only thing that we discussed, and I think Don, I think you talked to John about it anyway, is just the rotation of the septic tank, but it's really the best we can do on that lot.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? I get a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the whatever road this is.
26 Rabbit Run.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're up to Next Level Water Sports LLC. recreational camp variances.
Yes, so this is before you today for recreational water-based camp. There are some variances being requested. Okay. What we do have here is the application as a whole is in the packet. I can put it on screen, but it was also, it's actually kind of hard to read, but we can do it. And there's a significant amount of variances, and I'll let Mr. Beery go through. Just make sure to introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, for sure. My name's John Berry, co-owner of Next Level Water Sports. So yeah, basically we appeared before you guys this fall. We had gotten a ticket and a cease and desist in connection with our youth semi-private lessons or water sports camp that we've done for years. And basically we started water sports camp not knowing the regulations and what camp entails. And basically last winter I went on the radio to offer scholarships to local kids. The next day, the health department reached out informing us of 105 CMR 430. So basically since that day, we've been doing a lot of work trying to comply with these rules. So in the packet we put together, basically there's a series of structural problems we have related to the fact that we do not have a waterfront facility. And in conducting, when I met with you guys in the fall, we had a great meeting and you guys challenged me to go out and figure out how other camps are handling some of these logistical problems. And that's what I went and did. I've been working on this actively for probably 2 years, and with the hope of being able to comply with 105 CMR 430. And basically what it comes down to is the state does not opine. They defer to local jurisdictions and the Board of Health as to what you guys want around town as a camp and what you don't. And they allow for variances within that are up to the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. So in our variance requests, we have, again, the structural problems. And when you read these requirements, they are intelligent and you can see the goal of they're trying to provide safe camp settings for kids. So a physical infirmary, mandatory. You need to be able to provide bathrooms and facilities for kids to wash their hands, mandatory. You need to have phones to be able to talk to authorities if need be, communicate, et cetera, et cetera. So on basically within this list of variances, storage and administration of medication, we don't have an electrical supply. So we're able to lock up meds. We cannot keep them between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit for a sustained period. Emergency medical facility. We do not have an infirmary. We don't have a building. We don't have somewhere where someone can be isolated necessarily. So we have our boats. Ring buoy present. You have to have a ring buoy. We have ample flotation supplies on all of our boats, et cetera, like shelter for camp. When a storm rolls in, where is everyone going to hide? So I can go through the whole list, but again, what it comes down to is, can we provide a safe camp? So you guys challenged me with going and doing research. And I've found a whole series of accredited camps in Massachusetts that use the proposals that we are offering. So restroom facilities, we have a slip that we pay for at the town pier. The kids walk by the public restrooms on the way to our vessels. We remind them, go to the bathroom, go out on the water. As our final stopgap, we've identified, they're called WAG bags, waste alleviation and gelling bags, where it's a portable toilet. It's a bag. You go in the bag. It's not a glamorous thing to talk about, but then you would zip it up. It has chemical crystals that start the decomposition of human waste, and it can be disposed of in the trash, just like an adult or child diaper. And like in my proposal, I have recommendations from the Bureau of Land Management But mainly in all of my calls, I spoke with Overland Adventures, an incredible institution that changes people's lives, and they are accredited in Massachusetts. And they go on multi-week long hiking trips all through the backcountry, and wag bags are their go-to. For infirmaries, they do not have a physical infirmary they can bring with them, but they're smart about it. They have a conversation at the start. They know all instructors have first aid kits. They're doing, they have emergency evacuation plans if inclement weather rolls in. They carry satellite phones with them because they're in a much, much more remote area. And they're approved by their local board of health. What it comes down to for us is we've been operating since 2016. We just want to be able to operate. And our operations have been ensnared in this 105 CMR 430, calling us a camp. And the definitions are fairly loose. If you have more than 5 children on site for greater than 2 hours, you're a camp. So the Just Do It 2 charters falls under that. Nantucket bus tours, they offer a service for kids greater than 3 hours. So you find all these things. So like what this all comes down to is our first assertion. And from the start with all of this, we just want to work with the town. We have a great relationship with Sheila Lucy. Included in that packet is a letter of recommendation. We've gone to the fire department. The fire department reviewed our proposal and said, this is great. You guys do a really good job. We have a letter of approval from them. We've gone through all of these things. First assertion would be that we aren't a camp. If we can avoid the our goal is to run a safe company. Under the law, when you read these definitions, I can poke holes in it and say, technically, we aren't a camp. We operate greater than 15 days outside of the period of June 1st to September 30th, one of the rules. So first and foremost, we aren't a camp. Second, if we are going to be classified as a camp, the proposals and methodologies we're using are used by other entities within the state of Mass and are approved by their local boards of health. And the final is just, we do this because we love it. There's a shortage of camps or resources for kids during the summer. NCS has wait lists, Strong Wings has wait lists. And we put a lot of work into this, and we just want to be able to operate, whether that be a camp or not a camp. Our whole goal is to work with the Board of Health, work with the health department, and provide a service that's valuable for the community and you guys feel safe granting a variance on or allowing us to operate, not as a camp.
How old are these children?
So our minimum weight, we don't have an age, we have a minimum weight, and that's at 70 pounds. And typically that kicks in at 8 to 9 years old. And one thing to add within this is saying we're not a camp. We only have kids on site for 3 hours. It fits into our traditional lesson schedule. And you think of a camp of everyone arriving, you have cubbies, you have a huge group of kids. We have a 2-to-1 student to instructor ratio. So we have those 70-pound kids. The reason we pair them with 2 kids to 1 instructor is when you are kiteboarding, you can only have 1 kite in the sky at a time. So you have kids with instructors next to them continuously. But indirect answer to your question.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say you have an accident and right now you're asking for 10 variances.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's say you have an accident with the children with the things, the services you have, you can't handle it and something drastic happens.
And that's where we have our emergency protocol within our lessons. And this is going to be our 9th year. When we have an event, we follow our protocol to the letter. Calls go, the police get called, fire department gets called, they respond, they come to Pocomo. We have the ability to stabilize and transport right to emergency personnel. So if something major happens, we have our protocols. And that's what we follow, and everyone's trained on them thoroughly.
Do the parents know that these 10 things that we say you should have, do they know you don't have any of this?
And that's part of it. So I would be more than happy to inform parents. And that's where when parents are signing up for classes with us, when they're signing up, they're aware that we're a kiteboarding, wakeboarding, hydrofoiling business. They know we're going to be going out. They know where we operate. And if it's something that we have to add an additional disclosure regarding the variances, we're more than happy to sign off, like have a parent sign off on that. But to make it clear of what people are getting.
Does a Boston Whaler have a battery?
Yes,
Like a
sir.
12-volt battery? Because they have little 12 by 12-inch refrigerators that just clamp right to that. I use those for when I'm traveling. And it would be a cheap, potentially way to keep medications at the proper temperature.
Exactly.
The skiff that you bring out, is that towed out by the boat? Or, I mean, how does that barge, the Carolina skiff, get out there?
That's a great question. No, all the boats are independently powered. So because we're out on the water, we kind of have remote storage vessels that hold all of our safety equipment and all the broader equipment. So all of those are self-powered. And they do have 12-volt powered systems that we could very easily run a refrigerator.
Well, I was thinking about the skiff. I mean, is there a way, if that boat is out there, if that barge is out there with your other boats, can you put the, like the temporary toilet facilities on there?
And that's,
in a tent. I mean, essentially, it's customizing a barge, but, trying to get closer to what the regulations would like to see happen.
and what you're proposing is exactly what we have proposed as an alternative. And that's where this collapsible seats and bags would be stored on that. But when you look at the hard letter of the law, it requires 2 bathrooms for each gender with hand washing stations. And that's where Overland faces the same problem. They're not hiking bathrooms around with them. And they're utilizing the best, safest alternative to meet the spirit of what the regulations want, a safe camp with access to restroom facilities. So what you're proposing is exactly what we've proposed to the Department of Health.
Yeah, Roberto, this might be a question for you in terms of like when with Strong Wings, and it's like a golf camp, so kids are out and about away from a home base or a structure. Does this being on water, is that different than those situations where kids might be biking and they're on a 60-mile trek or whatever, and they're out and about, miles away from a station, with the counselors having, I'm assuming, phones and stuff to contact? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this fits into our existing kind of adventure type camps that we have.
Naturally, everyone is different. So we do have to approach each one different, and how well we can oversee or fit into this regulation. For example, like you said, a golf camp. Golf camps have taken access to bathrooms into consideration, and you can get to a bathroom in a little bit easier situation than being out on the water. But when we do, and then Strong Wings, for example, all of their routes are already pre-approved, and access to bathrooms are on that route. So Chris Couture actually brings to us, it's in his operating manual of where all the bathrooms available are when they're out. So it's a tad bit different for them when you're on the water versus when you're not on the water, because that access is a little bit harder. Community sailing, for example, has their base, so it's easier for them. This is definitely a very difficult variance, because being out on the water creates an inaccessibility. That's just the nature of being on the water. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, like Mr. Beery said, are you meeting the spirit? And that's where the board comes in.
Can I just add one point? We've worked as a service provider for Strong Wings
Yeah.
for 3 years leading up to COVID, doing exactly what we're proposing for our own camp with Strong Wings.
So let me ask you a question. What do we qualify him as? A camp?
Unfortunately, what happened was when it came to our attention, we kind of used the lens of a camp because it was advertised as a camp. And it's one of those situations that once you started putting them side by side with the regulation, yes, they hit the definition of the camp.
So if he's a camp, he has to get a permit from us.
Correct.
Do you have a permit from us for last year?
I do not. And that was,
And you operated all last year with no permit?
we did youth semi-private lessons, and that we rebranded, shifted away from camp completely.
That was we had a discussion where we were looking at the website and it's like, it's saying it's not a camp, but the website.
And then the web.
And that was kind of.
And that's where, like, so I have the definitions right here if you guys want to look at that, but our preferred would be, like, we didn't understand what camp entails when all of this came about. And our preferred would be youth semi-private lessons because that's what they are. And last year we attempted to rebrand and shift away from camp, and we still got in trouble. And that's been what's so challenging with this, is we just don't have, we're unsure of where to go and what to do.
So keeping you under 5 is non-camp. Is that essentially, I mean, 5 is a magic number
I believe so.
for providing services to children under a supervised setting, blah, 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 5 children.
So it's defined as a recreational camp for children, any day, primitive or outpost, residential, sports, travel, or trip camp conducted wholly or in part for recreation or recreational instruction, which operates for profit or philanthropic or charitable purposes, whether or not a fee is charged. We're guilty. Serves 5 or more children who are not the members of the family or personal guests of the operator. Guilty. Operates for any period between June 1st and September 30th of any year. Guilty. But then it says, or fewer than 15 business days during any other time of the year. We operate year round as a business. And then day camp says operates on a site for more than 2 hours. 4 days in a 14-day consecutive period, and meets the definition of recreational camp for children. So when you look at the definition,
You're a camp.
we aren't a camp. And the other side is this definition is all encompassing. Just Do It 2 charters as a camp. If they take 5 kids out fishing for 2.5 hours, which is their stated duration time, they're a camp. And that's where we don't know how to back away. And we just want to be able to operate and provide a safe.
When you interviewed the other camps, and most of those are ones that are operating under the primitive camp.
Precisely.
exception,
Yeah.
Because of inaccessibility to provide. I mean, they're out in the woods or out in trails.
Yep.
Okay.
My problem is, if you say you're not a camp, why are you here?
Because we haven't been provided with any alternative. We haven't been offered the ability to rebrand and say, we aren't camp, we are youth, we're semi-private lessons, which is what we would like to do. And then if we are going to be held to the camp standards.
The part I don't understand is you're saying you're not a camp, but you're standing before us and you want us, last year we said, if you want a permission, you are a camp, you have to do what it says.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we didn't give you permission, we didn't give you a permit, and you operated last year. And you're going to operate again this year without a permit from us if we don't give you one.
We aren't. We've discontinued. We do individual coaching. So to your question, what are we asking? The ask is the consideration of this. And if we are going to be held to the camp standard, can we be approved? As there are other entities operating in a similar manner.
Well, the way, if I had to vote on something and we said that you are a camp, you have to, there's 10 variances you need here before you can even think about opening.
Yes, sir.
And if we say you're a camp, when you do these, you can't do these.
For those variances, we would implement every protocol that I've
See,
outlined.
Here's my problem, and I'm only one person on this board. I feel I don't have the right to give you a permit for the way you want it and have some young kid, you have an incident and something happens, then it's on my shoulders. That's my problem.
And I understand that view.
I mean, I'd have to agree with Jimmy. You don't even meet the minimum standards for half those things that you want. And that's a big ask from this board, especially when, we're entrusted with people's, public health and safety of, anybody running a camp.
And I absolutely agree with that. And that's why there's been a lot of thought and consideration and looking at how other boards of health have been able to weigh the benefits of an outdoor service that teaches someone something different with accommodating around these hard and fast rules designed to keep kids safe.
You're in a time constraint. So if you could make a time where it was under that protocol and then you called it lessons, you wouldn't even be here, right?
And that's the challenge we have. And we've floated that idea and we haven't been able to find an alternative. And that's why we're here.
So to go to 2-hour sessions is not viable.
The challenge with 2-hour sessions is when people arrive, by the time there's roughly 45 minutes of setup. And for parents to take kids to us and then depart, it makes it not really worth it. And it also makes it hard for us to be able to deliver the knowledge we want to be able to teach.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions. Is that time count as camp time? In other words, that 45 minutes, is that camp time or is that just pre-camp time? And camp time doesn't start till you go out in the boat.
And that we could look at it that way. And that's our attempt has been to work collaboratively and figure this out. And that's something we're more than open to.
See, I have another I'm trying to be fair here, and that we've talked about other organizations on the island that have somewhat similar programs. And you've kind of got stuck into being a camp where the others have had variances because they have other reasons to have a variance. So if you just gave semi-private lessons, you wouldn't have to be here, right?
And that's what we want to do.
So why don't you just give semi-private lessons and let us and go home?
And that's what the challenge is. We did that last year and we still got ensnared in it. So we are more than happy to do semi-private lessons. That is something we would love to do.
Well, the snare was partly because of the website, I think, in some ways.
Exactly. And just
you
look
advertise one thing and you said, and that kind of created this loop that was troubling.
Maybe the health department could just, if you just redid your website and you just did semi-private lessons, then we could all go home.
And that's what I would love to do. Frankly, like when this whole camp thing happened, it was something totally
right.
And
you have a record on this island. You've worked for Winds and all. So
I coach the high school Santa team, all this stuff.
Yeah,
I love our community.
Yeah.
I love what we do. And if that's a viable outcome that we can operate, providing
Well, I'm
semi-private,
just a simple guy. It seems to me like it should just give you private lessons and you go on with it.
I think
And so the
that's,
question would be then, would the Board of Health go after him if there's a 3-hour window, but he comes back and says, but an hour of that is spent pre and post getting so actual instruction. I don't want to suggest
So-
something that we turn around and say,
Yeah, no.
gotcha. So,
So 3 specific answers to that, but first, I know I want to give Meredith some time on.
I just have been thinking about this one a lot, and I mean, I think I agree with what everyone's been saying. If there was 4 kids and for less than 3 hours, then it's not a camp. Also, Strong Wings does have, if you look at other camps, they have a base where the kids meet and start from that has a shelter. There are nature-based preschools on the island that have a base and a shelter. So if there is inclement weather, they have shelter that they can go into that is still outdoors and shelter that they can go to that is indoors. So I just think like a thunderstorm comes in, the boat races to Pocomo Point, and the kids are everyone's just kind of stuck there. Like that is my concern with all of this, is there's just no shelter. But I think if you make it less than 3 hours and less than 5 kids, then you don't need us. It's semi-private lessons and it doesn't have to comply with anything, and just don't use the word camp.
yes.
Am I understanding that correctly?
No, everything you bring up, Meredith, is spot on. And this is the challenge we've been facing, and that's why we've been trying to work through it. But what you just proposed is a completely viable solution.
Also, 70 pounds. There are 5-year-olds that are 70 pounds. There are much younger children, because I'm at the elementary school, that 70 pounds is not necessarily an 8-year-old. There are 5-year-olds that are 80 pounds. So I do think, like, when you start thinking about it, you could have, if it's weight-based, you could have a 5-year-old out there that developmentally is very different than having an 8 or 9-year-old.
Absolutely. And that's something every time we have parents calling for lessons, looking to get their young kids out, and that weight age threshold is something we're always evaluating to make sure we can coach them safely or turn them away if we can't.
You carry insurance policy?
Absolutely. As required by the town.
So a few things of this, to use the words of today, the snare that happened. Paragraph 2 of that very definition that he read said, provided it is not promoted or advertised as a camp, none of the following shall be deemed a recreational camp. The big red flag was that it was advertised as a camp.
Absolutely.
So that needs to change. 5 is the magic number. If it's 4 or less, we don't have a problem. And so that by itself is the issue. And then another one is in that same paragraph 2, subsection C says a program operated solely on a drop-in basis. So if you set up a reservation system for it to be just that one day, 1 hour of classroom time before you go out on the boat, 2 hours on the boat, then you're talking about private lessons, not a camp.
Got it.
And there's a way to operate without this triggering happening.
So if you were to do that, I would still try to do a lot of the things that were recommended because they are beneficial. The manual and stuff you had developed to present to us, and I hope that it actually is part of everything you do, because it really was thorough. And that your staff, if that is the level of training and knowledge that staff have to have, that's good. So, I mean, that was nice to look through and just kind of, see the detail, and that, things are thought out.
That means a lot, because we put years into making that and really take pride on what we do. So thank you for that.
And
So
I know, Mr. Beery, I know that there's been some tough with our staff, but also for the record, we have no objection to the activity altogether. Like, we would love to see this continue. Our job is to make sure that we find a way for you to operate, is the point. Where the snare happened is this definition of a camp. And that, I think we can find that middle ground operationally is really where we're at. As a camp, you need these 10 variances.
Absolutely.
Operating out not as a camp by specifically doing those 3 parts that we talked about. You don't have to do these variances, but it's still a good best
We want to
practice.
follow.
It is still a good best practice.
and the other, and actually it's even ties to yesterday's meeting where the extra funding for youth activities with behavioral mental health for youth in the community. And, the thing is, part of that is being able to have kids exposed to a wide range of activities. It's for the purpose of kind of development and kind of like this development of self while they're teens. And so we want to have a range of activities. And we are surrounded by water. We are, we should, promoting the love and safety around water. So, I do want to see you doing these things because it's another thing for students to learn about and also to understand the ocean and, the environment we're in.
I think Carrie's comment is right on it. Your instruction falls very well within what we talked about at the select board last night about funding for youth development. Particularly, this is an island. Our youth should learn about the water.
And it is such an incredibly beautiful way of enjoying the island. And that's why we started the scholarship, because our services are expensive, but we want kids going out there. We want to operate professionally. We want to have a really good relationship with the town.
So
So we don't.
to
have
not
anything?
do anything with the Board of Health, should there be communication about
So-
what they're doing?
So what we can do, so where we are now is either we vote to either approve or deny the variances so that they can operate as a camp or not operate as a camp, or you can choose to take no action.
Or withdraw the request too.
Or withdraw the request. And then what we need to do is work in a way to find how you not meet. this
Yeah, to not be a
definition.
camp.
Yes.
Not
By
to say the
definition.
double negative in a sentence, but how to not meet this regulation in a way that you can continue as the next level water sports with the semi-private youth with semi-private programs and lessons without it triggering the camp definition. Using the menu,
Yeah,
exactly.
don't let that thing go.
Operationally, we have no objection.
So listen,
Operationally, as a camp, it
Yes.
has to meet these
And that's the
definitions.
structure.
are we in agreement now that he's gonna run that thing, not as a camp?
And
And
it's
if he
not
says yes, then we don't have to vote on anything.
We
exactly.
can,
He
right.
can walk out, turn around, and walk out of this room, be happy as
Yeah, but
you
we have-
want to
yeah.
be.
have to
In-
have
in-
some way
We
on
do-
this.
yeah.
Either has to withdraw or we have to
Take no action.
take no action.
Yeah, because the legal term is without prejudice. Whether we vote for or against. If we vote against it, that's considered with prejudice because we're putting a stipulation on the vote. So we either withdraw or take a no action, and then we just work with him to get to a middle ground.
So we're happy to withdraw our motion. The big thing for me is just understanding who I can talk to and how. And as long as I have a clear path forward with how we can structure this to work really well, we're happy to withdraw.
So for the record, Kathy, so once the vote is done, Kathy, write it down, the vote, but I'll put it for the record that the contact for this moving forward so that we can get to this middle ground will be John Hedden and myself.
And can I get a motion?
Wait a
from-
minute, I want to know exactly what we're voting on.
To take no action.
To take no action.
Oh, he's withdrawing.
I'm withdrawing.
Oh, you're
He's withdrawing.
Okay.
So from one of the board members, can I get a motion to take no action on this?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
We have to do that if he's withdrawn.
We don't have to do it if
Yeah.
he's withdrawing. As long as we accept the withdrawal.
Well,
So
do we accept, make a motion to accept the withdrawal?
there you go.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And then,
Thank you.
it's on. So- and then we'll go-
Okay, review of the minutes, January 19, 2023.
I know it says January 19th. The minutes were actually for February.
February.
It was last month's meeting. Just minutes.
I don't abstain.
Motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And one abstention.
And one of Malcolm abstains. Okay, so then now we're gonna go to Roberto's director's report
Yep,
for
just-
the end.
Just real quick, I'm going to try to keep this one below 5 minutes. Obviously, we've been working on the well regulations. That's been a significant portion of the last few weeks. There has been a lot of movement on the water extension right now. So the Montahasset area west of the airport, as well as some of the what we're going to do with the soil. So some of the funding from SRF was approved just yesterday. So they're going to start moving forward with the construction to expand the water piping for the area west of the airport, that we're filling in all the gaps. That was not done from the PFAS remediation. With that, they have also filed, they as in the airport, has filed a request to be able to reuse the spoils to create a berm at the airport to help with noise mitigation. So it's kind of I hate to say win-win because nobody wins when there's PFAS contamination, but it is a way to be able to use the soil without having to remove it as hazardous waste. As long as it meets the leaching standards. So they will have to put in the geotextile fabric that collects all the leachate, and then that gets sent over for treatment. There is also work moving forward in the plastics bylaw, as we were talking about it with, we had a PFAS meeting with the landfill, the water company, the airport, town administration, CDM Smith. And in that meeting, one of the things that was brought up was the plastics bylaw with the biodegradable packaging bylaw tend to conflict. And because of that conflicting, it's caused a lot of confusion in the office, because some plastics are allowed by the by the biodegradable packaging bylaw, but those specific plastics are not allowed by the plastics bylaw. So it's one of those situations where we have to pick the lesser of two evils when it comes to food grade material. So the conversation with the landfill was brought up that maybe we're all going to try to work together to come up with better wording that would supplant the plastics and the biodegradable packaging bylaw into one bigger bylaw that would coincide with the 2025 RFP for the landfill, for the vendor. So that's in the process. That's all new from this last month. And then lastly, unfortunately ending with a little bit of bad news, is I did run the numbers for Lyme disease last year, and we had the worst year in the last 12. We had 304 probable and suspect cases, which is 72 cases higher than the second place year, which was 2013, exactly 10 years ago. So we are, with climate change and with the winters getting much more mild, ticks are much more active. In fact, they may be active today because it's 45 degrees outside. So it's Lyme, Babesia, all of the tick-borne illnesses. it's going to be back in the forefront as our primary illness of concern. COVID is going to start taking a back seat. So that is the future for at least the next few months. We were doing great work on tick-borne illnesses, and then things just kind of turned left. And then we go from there.
Roberta, what's the health department's plans to deal with that?
That's a good question. I ran those numbers today, so I haven't had a chance to really look at it. I ran that number this morning and I nearly fell out of my chair. It was definitely higher than I was expecting. We were on track to be on par for a hard year, but I never expected that we would be more than 20% higher than the previous highest year. That was very unfortunate. And I think there was also a false sense of security that we all ended up in with this Lyme vaccine clinical trial that was coming out. I think it was one of those, just like in Jaws said, just when you thought it's safe to go back out into the water is what happened. Just when people thought it was safe to go back into the woods, tick-borne illnesses spiked. So I'm going to work with the Cape and Islands tick biologists that we have, Patrick Road and Reynolds, and try to get him out here a couple weeks this summer, working with Sam Telford and getting some outreach and everything together.
Would you be willing to come back in a couple of meetings and kind of
absolutely
report on what?
Absolutely.
Not just the horrible news, but what are we going to do about it?
This is definitely back into the forefront of my mind as director, and it'll be a little bit easier now that we have staff. Being able to have John as our chief environmental health officer, and no offense to our inspectors, being able to take the administrative work for the environmental health side has been able to give me a lot more freedom to look at our infectious disease side and community health side. And this will be a big portion of my work coming forward. So I'm going to end up, unfortunately, neglecting our inspectors a little bit, asking John to handle a lot of our environmental health stuff first. But that's what we do as a team. We work together.
Is
We
mostly
pivot.
temperature, or are people reporting it better?
That's a good question. What we have been noticing is through telehealth, we do get an artificial inflation of some of these, not artificial, but we get an inflation of some of this information because access to healthcare is there, a little bit better access to healthcare. What we did see was a huge shift from confirmed to probable, which tells me that the laboratory tests aren't being done, that they're going straight from symptoms, and they're prescribing the antibiotics straight through right away. So that tells me that there is a bit of a shift in the way they're diagnosing Lyme. I think we are diagnosing Lyme more so as a secondary illness, secondary complaint. So they're coming in for thinking they have something else, and it turns out they have Lyme. And Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. I think clinically that might be what we're seeing as well. But you have your hand up too. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just harder to, if you're diagnosing it from the lab values, they're not necessarily going to have positive titers when they come in with a rash, say.
Yeah.
So you're just going to get more people coming in with the rash and being diagnosed and treated, and maybe never going and getting their blood work.
Yeah.
And the 200 number for Lyme, is that just Lyme, or is that Lyme and the other tick-borne diseases?
No, unfortunately, this 304 for 2022 was just Lyme. I did not do all the tick-borne illnesses. So we had a banner year for Lyme. 234 was in 2013. So hopefully not hopefully, I will task our new public health nurse when we hire them to also start pushing this information out as well. I do know Patrick, our biologist that we're paying for through the public health the Inter-Island Public Health Excellence Grant. Patrick did come up with a lot of outreach material for the vineyard already. So we won't have to reinvent the wheel for a lot of that.
A bunch of years ago, I mean, probably like around 2000 or so, when you're on the ferry, they ran a thing about ticks. Can we maybe turn off the game show and do something like that? Because, you know, if you paid attention, I mean, at least it was there. They also have more screens now than they did then. Just because people don't know or don't truly understand the magnitude of, they think it's, if I don't go in the woods, I'm fine. And
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. It can be in your garden at home.
So, I mean,
So you're talking about the video with a certain island doctor who may be related to one of our Board of Health
it's a
members.
possibility. It could be a relationship.
Yes, that video there was actually a short video that was also made, that was also played at the Dreamland ahead of movies.
Yeah.
So I can talk to, I don't know why I'm blanking out on her name, the executive director at the Dreamland, to see if she's willing to run that again.
You know, we've got to use, there's the ways that we have to post, websites, stuff like that, town websites. But the thing is, that's not where people are.
Yeah.
People are on the boats, people are in Dreamland. So I mean, we've got, to be able to at least have people understand what a tick-borne disease is, symptoms, and how to possibly prevent it. I mean, remember we had when MIT came last year, whatever, they gave out the socks. That we
Yep.
could, that was our free pair of socks for attending the workshop.
Yep.
With the
permethrin
thing in it.
Yeah, the permethrin
So,
treated socks.
But again, those kind of things, if we want to try to get the public to understand better, I think we've got to go to where the public is and telling them to come to us.
Absolutely. So we'll work on that.
Yeah. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.